what do these stories reinforce? What do they really tell us about the world, about ourselves, about other people? Whose story is being told? Who's the hero? Who's the villain? What is it in the story that's not being told? For the next panel, the role of media in building narratives for gender justice, I'd like to call upon our speakers, Raghu Karnad, independent journalist and writer, Namita Bhandare, also an independent journalist and author, Shaili Chopra, founder of SheThePeople and Gayatri, Revati Laul, independent journalist and activist, and Sapna Kedia from the ICRW.
And I wanted to start by congratulating Sequin and congratulating Laura and Sarah on 15 years of doing incredible work. And also, congratulations on putting together such an excellent panel. I really feel that I could speak for an hour with any one of these panelists and probably anyone in the audience as well on this subject, which is what media can do to shape our attitudes towards gender and gender justice. But there are 4 people, so I'm going to try and do instead of getting very deep, very quickly, I'm going to try and get something very concrete from you right off the top, which is this question: what media can do to shape gender justice. What does it prompt in you in terms of your own encounters with media? What does it make you think of in terms of actual pieces of media that have come up on your screens recently?
Just the last 24 hours of Poonam Pandey is a great example for us to start this conversation. Let me ask this group, I know we are all laughing, but I'm very curious because, my DMs on Instagram are like infested with people who are batting for this as an awareness idea that led people to start thinking about the term cervical cancer. Anyone here can raise their hand if they really think it's helped the cause of awareness. I'm just curious. Okay, there are 3-4 people here.
Some brave hands.
Yeah, that might be true. So the rest of you are perhaps on the side, at least I am at the moment, which is that I don't really think that this was a way to increase awareness about cervical cancer. Having said that, should that really need a lot of attention? Yes, it does. But I think there are ways in which you tell stories. There are ways in which you create awareness. And we didn't really need Poonam Pandey to suddenly one day make, justify for the work that's being done by 1,000 others in this place with a lot more depth and perhaps more on ground. I think, so that's one way of looking at stories. When it comes to women, why should things be so gimmicky that they sort of, are reduced to an issue, reducing such an important issue of cervical cancer in a country like ours, where I think at a bare minimum, at least 12 to 14% women die of this, and the number that gets it is extremely large. So I think that's one. The other is the absolute opposite spectrum. And I say this to an audience that actually knows how to work very significantly on the ground with real issues. We just never show women having fun. The idea of a woman having fun in the press is flippant, and the fact that it's in the press is also because it appears flippant. So you'll find stories about women who are found exiting a disco, perhaps according to the press, not looking up to the mark or whatever, and just not suggest that, what, today, just like I remember, by the way, it's not just an Indian phenomenon, was it the Finnish Prime Minister? Sanna Marin, when she was found having a good time, people criticized her around the world for making headlines for the wrong reasons. Like, women, if we don't start looking at as regular people, people who fail, succeed, celebrate, enjoy, and normalize the press covering that, I think we will remain in this constant department called the CSR department for the rest of our existence. I mean, the CSR department, even from the lens of press, there's a connotation. The CEO says, it's not my job, send it to CSR. I love CSR and I really appreciate all the work they do, but I don't get the escape route the CEO takes. So just wanted to make those 2 spectrums on the press coverage of this stuff.
Yeah, those are great starting points, actually. I like women having fun because, of course, fun is a really important part of being alive and human thriving. And I have a feeling Revati is going to add things to that. But also this Poonam Pandey thing, if we're talking about the word media, then there's no getting away from how provocation and breaking the rules seems to be now integral to to the structure of media algorithms and so on. And that's something we're going to have to talk about if we can. Namita, let me come to you next.
Well, I'm actually grateful to Poonam Pandey for one reason. I don't know whether anyone is more or less aware of cervical cancer, but she has told us very clearly, and we've just come back. Me and Revati were in Mumbai recently at the Network of Women in Media meeting, and the reality is that news is dead. We're all consuming content. That's what it is. People don't read newspapers, they don't watch television, they're watching reels. So Poonam Pandey is the manifestation of the times we live in. We're consuming content. Having said that, back to Raghu's original question on what were for me the turning point, without a doubt, was December 2012. The Jyoti Singh gang rape and murder, and I think it opened up a massive, massive conversation. It certainly changed personally the direction of my work. Earlier I was writing this and that, and for the last 11 years it's only been gender, nothing else. We're 50%, 48 point something percent of the population. That is all that concerns me and obsesses me, and I find it enriching. And it's not all doom and gloom. The other story that I found really inspiring and a boost of was the protests at Shaheen Bagh, because it shattered the stereotype of women who can't have fun while protesting. These were the dadis and the nannies, Muslim women, all the stereotypes about ye to ghar ke bahar nahi aati hain, ye burkhe mein hai, ye, and they're laughing, they're singing, and they're unbroken. So that was what it was for me.
Did you see either of them turned into other forms of media, like repackaged or adapted? I think that maybe was Delhi Crime based on...
Yes, it was, with Shefali Shah.
Did you watch it?
I did, but I'm trying... Yes, I mean, I think the script was fairly faithful to the facts, except for there was a boyfriend who became the villain of the piece in this thing, whereas everybody had forgotten him and moved on. So yes, that protest, I cannot tell you what it did. I mean, I made a small documentary film. I was for a Singaporean company. And the first time we went to meet her mother, I mean, they had not yet been given this government house. They were living in, and she was just, I'll never forget her. And my hair still stands on end. And we are in this small room. There's a camera person. There's a guy with that sound, that boom mic, big thing. There's a producer. There's me. And everybody puts down, the men put down their equipment and they're just weeping. They're just sitting in that little room. So there was something in that girl's story that I think moved the entire country in a way that nothing else has. Not Kathua, not Hathras, nothing. Worse, or as bad. They were not on a hierarchy of which was a worse rape and which is a lesser rape. But that just moved everybody, and I'll never, for my life, explain why. I mean, I said, this is it. I don't want to do anything else. I would rather stop writing. I only want to do gender. And
yeah, let's try and come back to what a watershed that moment was. I mean, it's bringing back memories that I haven't had for a while about the protests at India Gate, and the people climbing on the electrical lights and things, and it was like something we'd never seen before. And the water cannons, exactly. But Revati, what has been on your mind or on your screen recently?
I actually thought it would be good to look at gender conversations that have actually shifted the way we look at gender in the media. And there are two very big ones that I thought would be interesting to flag up. One is a gender site called the Mook Nayak, which is basically taking its name from what Ambedkar wrote when he was alive, which is the hero of the dumb, literally speaking. And Meena Kotwal, a journalist, a woman, a Dalit woman, said she was practically reduced to an invisible phenomenon in mainstream newsrooms until she then decided that then she had to be her own editor and create a newsroom. So when a Dalit woman starts her own media space, how does it change the way we look at news overall?
I want to actually urge people to go to her site, and you will see a very different hierarchy of news. It doesn't break the news down into politics, sports, entertainment, finance, business, and horoscopes. It breaks the news down into Dalit, Adivasi, Shakti, Swasthya, Kisan. Now, that by itself tells you that when you put someone in charge of a newsroom that hasn't had that space before, they begin to look at politics differently. And that spoke to me very loudly, because I remember being in very conventional newsrooms, very women empowered, but still very conventional newsrooms from the 1990s onwards, where I always felt, oh my God, yeah, I'm interested in politics, but I'm not interested in what Sharad Pawar is saying per minute. And why does that make me a lesser political animal than the next person? And then I realized it's because the way we look at politics, the way we cover elections, goes counter to the way conventional women are raised in their homes. So if you are kind of raised to think more about food and clothing and aesthetics, why should that be lower down in the pecking order and be assigned to features? And why is that not politics? That's politics. So it takes a Meena Kotwal to shake that up. And on the other side, Agents of Ishq by Paromita Vora. Because Paromita Vora, if you look at Agents of Ishq, I was just looking at the lineup of stuff on her page this morning as I was coming here. And there's really exciting stuff. When we say pleasure, it's all there, up in front. How to talk about sex, what fun conversations these are. It's about putting pleasure back in the center. And we're talking about the horrors of Bollywood and creating male tropes like Animal, where basically a guy is just almost jacking off on the movie. He's just standing there and gunning people down and piling onto women as though, and the two things are the same thing. But that's because it sells. And why does that testosterone fused with violence sell and has become the mainstream of our politics, right? The BJP fuses violence in this way and reduces women in this way. So if we have to look at an alternative, I think we have to look in our media spaces to say, why are we always talking about gender in terms of violence and rape? I refuse to reduce gender conversations to violence and rape. Why can't we talk about the way grandmothers have told stories? Why can't we talk about, and when we talk about the women voter, can we zoom in? Who is a woman voter? Is she tribal? Is she Dalit? Is she Muslim? Is she Savarna? Is she a mix of these things? And how is that woman voter a separate slice from Dalit, tribal, Savarna? We don't ask these questions because we're actually not looking inside those spaces. It's tokenism. But there are spaces that are doing a great job of making us think. We need to look at those spaces, we need to power them, and the more we look at them, the more we hero these spaces like the Muknayak and Agents of Ishq, the more money will flow in that direction and mainstream it. Because unless we do that, we'll say, oh yeah, there's this lovely thing that I know about but don't look at.
Fascinating. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you brought up Muknayak, because first of all, it highlights that there is non-metropolitan, non-elite media that is coming out of new places, that's empowered by technology. I generally have quite a bleak view of technology and what it's doing to us. But voices like this get to really reimagine what the news should look like and what it means. And can also throw a spotlight on, again, on fun, on pleasure, on things that aren't dictated by our gaze on rural women or non-elite women. So I think there's a lot of connections to be made there. Sapna.
I'm sitting here as a consumer of Bollywood. I've grown up on Bollywood. I love Bollywood. And it's a little scary to say that in this room, but I'm also someone who works on gender justice. These two parts of my personality come out in contradictory ways in my work, in my conversations. I have read a lot of articles about Animal. I echo why it's problematic, but I also have people with whom I've had conversations about what they liked about the movie, right? And I think those contradictions is what the media needs to show. I think we've made talking about gender, we've made showcasing gender very heavy. Aisa nahi hai. When we go to villages, when we work with young men and boys, when you ask them कि अच्छा what is it that you find funny, what is it जो आपको देखना अच्छा लगता है, they will say TikTok में डब्लू बबलू है, वो एक दूसरे से मजाक कर रहे हैं, एक लड़की पुचका खा रही है, उसको छेड़ रहे हैं, and it's very funny. They'll talk to you about Bahubali. They'll say Bahubali बहुत अच्छा है, and then if you ask them further कि क्यों, why is it funny जब वो लड़के को छेड़ रहे हैं या लड़की को छेड़ रहे हैं, they'll say हाँ वो ठीक नहीं है, छेड़ना नहीं चाहिए, but the whole scene is fun. So those are the contradictions. जब आप बाहुबली की बात करते हो, they'll say वो सबको बचाता है, rescue करता है, वहाँ से they are picking up notions of masculinities कि ये हमें ऐसे करना है as a man, as a young boy, and these are boys who are in class 6, 7, 8 in government schools. They're picking that up, right? So what is it that we seek from media? At the end of the day, as a consumer of media, as someone who's interacting with people who's consuming media, we're looking to media for respite. Sometimes we want it to give us a route to escape. Sometimes we want it to speak back to us and show our reality. Sometimes we're looking at it कि कुछ बदलाव कर सके, right? I think these contradictions is what needs to come out in the media. Even when we talk about, say, gender just movies, when we talk about movies like perhaps, say, a Thappad, right? It's such a powerful movie. We can agree, we can disagree, but it's a powerful movie, and it's a Bollywood entertaining movie. It has good music, it has good whatever, it shows the contradictions in relationships. It's a healthy young couple in a metropolitan city, and then there's a slap. And what that slap does to the woman, what it does to their relationships. I think gender in all of our lives is everywhere. It's contradictory. We are constantly negotiating. And I think sometimes when we portray or when we talk about gender, I think we very conveniently make it into the black and white. I think we miss out on the gray. I think that's very, very important. And even based on our experience in the field, I think people consume media for change, but they also consume media for some respite, you know, in terms of escaping themselves, their realities, the norms of masculinities that they perhaps have to go through, the privileges that they exercise. I think that sort of discrepancy, that contradiction is very challenging to conquer, and it doesn't have to be without fun. It doesn't have to be without pleasure. I think we have to talk a little bit more about grey.
This brings to mind something that Revati once wrote for The Wire in the days of TikTok, when TikTok was still dominating everyone's time in India, about a young woman that you had met in Shamli, where you now live. Shamli, a small town in UP. Someone with quite a difficult life who was finding a new side of herself on TikTok. Do you want to tell us? You think that story gives us a lead into this subject?
Yeah, I was just, I was given a Ladli Fellowship to write about women in COVID, and I found this working class woman who was working in a factory making spoons. And she became like this amazing TikTok video maker, and she made hundreds of videos during the pandemic. And they were lovely, funny, sexy videos, but then her phone got stolen and her hard drive got lost. So we could only hear about her videos through her and didn't get to consume all the videos. But it just, like living in a place like Shamli changes the way you put women in boxes. You know, working class woman has to be a victim. Why? Why can't she have agency? And if we're talking about rapes and we're talking about Jyoti Singh versus the rape in Hathras in UP a few years later, there are a couple of stories in the Indian Express actually which alerted me to the fact that the reason this Dalit woman was raped was not because she was a Dalit woman, but because she decided to sort of look back, spurn the advances of an upper caste man. So when we write these stories, we write them as if the woman is always this flat character who doesn't have any agency. The main thing is women have agency, and women are very subversive. In the villages and the women I work with now in my avatar as an activist in Shamli in Western UP, in that district, there are so many women who do such interesting things. For example, in one village that I work in, I spotted 2 women who seemed like they were in a relationship with each other, a gay couple, in other words. And I was curious about, I was talking to a community leader who we work with very closely, and I said, have you, like, are there a couple? She said, yeah, and everyone in the village knows that they're a couple, but they're going to have to sort of succumb to getting married. But what everybody in the village is planning is that let them get married to in the same family, or 2 contiguous families, or to 2 brothers, so they can still be in their relationship. So women are naturally subversive. We've got to be, because we're dealing with men, right? So actually that's a great way to look at politics. Say yes, 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 yes. Say those 3 words that the regime is telling you to say, and then do the opposite underneath. Who will you learn that from but a woman or a trans person?
Yeah, well, couldn't agree more. We're going to have to do a lot of say yes and do other things a lot more in the future. Shaili, I think it's very useful for us to pay attention to what media online means for a little bit. We can't ignore that by any means. You made you started what is now a major online hub for feminist discussion and for talking about women's lives. How long ago was that?
It was 2015.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. But not without a large amount of debate from within women, whether women deserved or needed a platform for women.
Right, yeah.
Yes. That's when we were one. Today we have 45 million views a month.
Superb, congratulations.
And that just tells us that the space that one needs, sometimes you don't recognize you need that space on the constant battle of arguing with men and those who believe in the way the patriarchal discussion goes, that why do we need a separate place? I really am a huge believer of that separate place emerging and eventually, hopefully, merging someday. But given that 2024, we're still discussing this subject, it tells us even more why we need spaces for women that are safe and need to drive conversations. Sorry, I truncated your question in the middle, but what was it?
No, not at all. I think that's important. When you are editing SheThePeople, is there a particular field that you find, I mean, let's say at this point it's been not quite a decade, but it's been 8 years of doing that. Is there a particular field of human life or society that you think has been the most fruitful to talk about?
So there are a bunch of them. I think this changes for us every few years, as it should, because the conversations progress, as does hopefully to a great degree human capital and understanding of what's happening in the gender spaces. So for SheThePeople, when we just began, the way we started this conversation was 5 interns and I literally sat around a table like this and said, let's just tell each other our life stories. The first 100 Instagram posts came from that. That's the rest of the year, essentially. Because there was somebody in the room who had been molested by a tutor. Of course, it's such a normal story. I have been in blue lines and DTC buses, and I don't even remember the number of times I've been molested in college. So much so, my father was criticized back in 1998 for buying me a 2-wheeler after the stories I told him. He was like, oh, you're spoiling your girl, you're giving her too many wings with those wheels. It's the truth, I was just looking at safety. So I'm just saying, these are stories like that, but to the point, we were talking about Paromita's platform, one of the things that has just bloomed in SheThePeople over the last 8 years is a conversation on women's health. And when I say women's health, it means like I haven't even seen my body. I didn't know a thing about it. I didn't know that one of my breasts is smaller than the other, and why? Oh, by the way, I don't know why I discharged from so many places, but why? Right? We have stunned ourselves in the year 2020 by starting to put out content by doctors to the point about, yes, we're a content, come news, come journalistic platform, but we're broadly a lot of content. But we are careful about how we bring that content lens. So I wouldn't put a random creator because they have followers to talk about the body. We started putting real doctors. Doctors in English, Hindi, Bangla, Tamil, various languages, talking about the female body and the importance of understanding. One of our first videos that went viral on YouTube was what to ask a gynecologist on your first meeting with her. Girls didn't know this. I learned 80% of the questions there myself after producing 2 children from that video. And why am I saying this is because we just don't think that things that are academically absent in our world, right? I mean, we go to doctors, they give us 3 minutes for 1,200 rupees, and you're back with some medicine, you don't even ask why. These videos collectively have done 400 million video views. And they continue to do this. Big chunk of that is female pleasure. Pleasure points, why pleasure, why not pleasure, all of that. There is such an absence of things that women really don't have access to. And so I think there is a lot to be said about delicious looking videos on solo travel and jumping in Bali on a jhula. Lovely. We all need that. We all aspire for that. But there's something very core at the problem that women today want to solve. To the point of agency. Money is agency. Lots of conversations are happening there, but I am actually I have failed at creating content at money. And I'm a business journalist who moved in here. And the reason I failed is because even the most independent woman with the biggest agency in her family, with maximum agency in her family, she doesn't have agency over her money. She is super smart, she's an MBA, but she'll eventually tell her husband, can you just do this for me? And that's where she loses that agency. So I gave up on doing anything around women and money, and I said, okay, let's pick health, and let's see where we go with it. And boom. I mean, we've not seen any, we weren't even on YouTube until that first video about what to ask a gynecologist. And last week we crossed 1.1 million. It just tells you that the things that one thinks about the least, and think that, oh, ye to pata hi hoga. If women don't know their bodies, who does? Well, I guess no one knows that, including women.
Yeah, so there's still this huge process of discovery about what the questions are, let alone what the answers are.
I just want to make one small thing, which is that I would thank technology around women's health a lot. Not only in terms of how we are able to solve, because through SheThePeople came Gayatri, which is the platform now we actually offer services for women's health online. It's GYTREE, Gayatri.com. But the reason why I felt that technology gave this, these are private conversations. You want 100% privacy in the fact that you're even listening about this. So I think that made a big difference to our lives, that this conversation happened online.
Sapna, you said that you are on this stage as a consumer of Bollywood, but I'm going to disagree with you about that and draw you out on your other identity, which is as a researcher on women's health and reproductive rights and sexual relations. You were recently the lead researcher on a report on, which the title sounded fascinating to me, male involvement in premarital abortions. That's just, there's so much complexity to the picture that comes up when you see that. And it makes me wonder, from your research on that particular question, did that reveal anything about media people were consuming, about videos people might be seeking out on the internet, where people are finding information or inspiration?
Yeah. Thank you. That study is a little old now, but it was a sort of a life-changing study, because around that time I was probably in a love-hate relationship with men. And then we went to do this study where you're talking to men. You're talking to men about their feelings, you're talking to men about their vulnerabilities, and you're listening to them. I think what that study did, and to link it back to your question on media, I think a lot of the young men that we spoke to in groups, in person, one-on-one, they all said that we wanted to be supportive of our partner who was pregnant. Now, the circumstances of the pregnancy is debatable. You don't know about consent, you don't know about what led to the pregnancy, but what did support look like? Support looked like a promise for marriage. Support looked like doing a Reiki of the clinics secretly. Support looked like a Reiki, going to a faraway clinic, finding out who can provide a medical abortion, a surgical abortion to your partner. It meant arranging money. It also meant just sort of ensuring that the girlfriend of your partner is there for your friend, right? So all of that. But I think one thing that stood out is most of these men were like, okay, why are you asking us? Why do you want to talk to us about this? What is your ulterior motive? Because when we go to service providers, we are looked at as perpetrators. Service providers do not want to engage with us, especially because it's a premarital situation, right? And in cases where it's an intercaste relationship or there are differences in backgrounds. And these are also young people who have aspirations which doesn't culminate into marriage. Okay, there's a pregnancy, but we don't want to get married right now. We want to go through the abortion. But if I don't promise marriage, then I'm a perpetrator. Then I'm an exploitator, right? So that study sort of made me realize that young men are also flying away or sort of trying to escape this gaze of being a perpetrator, right? They're trying to escape this gaze of being a perpetrator. And I think one thing that stays with me a lot is this young man telling me and a fellow researcher that, are you asking me how I felt during the abortion? Are you actually asking me about my feelings and you're not asking me about the logistics of it? No one's really asked me how I feel. I felt very upset. I felt I let down my partner. I felt I wish I was in a position to perhaps marry her if that's what she wanted. But I did not want to get married at that point of time. I think the problem is that the media, in our conversations, even in spaces like this, I think we are not talking enough about masculinities. We are not talking enough about vulnerabilities of young men, along with talking about privileges, right? Of course, men are privileged. They've been privileged for very long, but they're also pressured, right? And where are the spaces that men are escaping this? Very recently, I saw a very beautiful film, Kadil, Malayalam film, right? And it speaks about a gay man, his marriage. It speaks about, and when it comes out in the open that he's gay, the society is responding normally. His wife and he are friends. I think that whole movie spoke about coming out and the challenges that one faces in a day-to-day conversational manner. It didn't make it this whole thing about, oh my God, this man cheated this woman, he was a closet gay person, and he sort of ruined his life, he ruined her life. It spoke about those daily nuances. I think that's what we have to speak about when we speak about gender in the lives of men, in the lives of women, in the lives of children, in the lives of adults, in the lives of elderly. We never speak about gender in the lives of elderly, right? And also people across the spectrum. I think that's very important.
Namita, I just want to ask you to help us wrap up. You know, you started out by mentioning something that had to be mentioned, which was this, you know, seismic moment for Indian media, for Indian gender discourse, which was the 2012 killing of Jyoti Singh. And we've also seen a lot, we've seen major moments of gender discourse that, of course, necessarily had an antagonistic quality in terms of how they talked about men and women. And Me Too obviously comes to mind in the last couple of years. But there's something else that's also coming out of this conversation, and it's also some attention to pleasure and to relationships and to the different positions that men can have vis-a-vis gender justice and supporting women. Since you are our official gender editor, how that adds up for you?
So let's just looking ahead. I think, you know, we've kind of. I want to caution everyone against entering any kind of state of lull or complacency, because you've got a lot of things ticked off. Your budget, the interim budget that was just passed, has the largest percentage ever in the history of gender budgeting and pre-bed gender budgeting for gender, earmarked for gender. You have 33% reservation for women. I keep forgetting the name, sorry, Tara. Stree Shakti, you have these wonderful slogans, Beti Bachao. You also have alongside, it's not just all about politics, you also have an incredibly aspirational generation of young girls, and Suhail will tell you more about them in his session. Girls in villages who want to play football, who want to do kushti, fathers who are saying go and do kushti, and girls saying that, yeah, we know it's tough. We know that there's a Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh who will sit in parliament and this government will do nothing at all. But we will still brave, we will still take our chances against predatory coaches and creepy men, क्योंकि हमको करना है, हमको बताना है. So against all of this, it's very easy to feel that the battle is won, and I feel that we really ought to be cautious. You have at this moment 6 states in India that have laws that practically make it impossible for interfaith marriages. You have the Allahabad High Court last week ruling and telling 8 interfaith marriages, there were Muslim men and Hindus, there were Muslim women and Hindu men. They said, no, sorry, we can't. They had gone to seek protection from their own families. This is a country where honor killings are continuing rampant, even years after marriage, that, you go back home and they kill the child, they kill the daughter. It continues. For generations. Lata Singh still cannot return home to UP. She's living in hiding in Rajasthan. She's a married woman with grown-up children. So, you have the judiciary, you have the state. In Maharashtra, you have a panel that says, now today the Uttarakhand Assembly is going to be debating a common uniform civil code. One of the items on that code is that if you're in a live-in relationship, you have to get it registered. What the hell? Why? You're not married. You get your marriage registered. What does it mean? Registered with whom? आप DM साहब के पास जाएंगे कि please sir, मुझे permission दीजिए, मुझे इसके साथ रहना है. So I think we're not realizing at just how dangerous. We're not at an emotional time like 2012, but we're at a very dangerous moment in our history. We need to safeguard our very hard won freedoms. The women's movement is literally built on the blood and bones of women. And yes, it's not rape and it's not violence. It's also, I think I'd like to end on that note of caution that we need to protect and safeguard our freedoms.
That's a good note. Well, it feels like we are at the beginning of our conversation rather than the end. But of course, the whole rest of the day has more conversations which will expand on all of this. And we didn't get to talk about sport, but there will be a session about sport. And thank you so much for all of your wisdom and insight.